It's a great honor and a privilege to introduce Dr. Davide Fachler. We're here in Jerusalem, and you did your thesis on 100 years of Orthodoxy in Johannesburg.
Yes.
And it was done through Cape Town UCT.
Yeah, for UCT.
At the Kaplan Center.
The Kaplan Center, yeah. And through the history department. Historical studies, normal.
At the University of Cape Town.
The PhD is through Department of Historical Studies.
So what made you interested in, I mean, you grew up in Johannesburg, but it's a fascinating subject.
No, it's a subject that hasn't been properly researched and studied. Especially, what happened was, I'll go from the beginning, whatever. I was looking to do a PhD after I finished my masters at Hebrew U, and in something different, and then.
What was your master's on?
My master's was on South Africa-Israel relations. I can do another. And how much the Jewish factor was important in that relationship. And my conclusion wasn't that important. Israel did what they wanted to do, and they often use the community just as an excuse. But that's a whole thesis. It's another subject. But after I did my master's, so I wanted to do something else, and originally what I was going to do was on the Baal Tshuva movement.
The Baal Tshuva movement in South
Africa.
Because it was quite a unique...
Yes, very unique. Now...
for those who don't understand, Baal Tshuva, those returning to
Judaism, returning to religion. So originally I was going to start the thesis at around 65, 70. Because that's when the Kollel came, Chabad, and that's when that turned the tables a lot in South African Jewry. But so that was my original thought, and then I realized that the story goes back way before. So I cover like from around 1920. I go back but before until 2020. I did like a whole century. Because the chief rabbin has also changed. A lot has changed. A lot has changed from 1970. The last 50 years, a ton has changed, but also things changed before. And so to see the whole sequence of events, that's what I did in my thesis.
A lot when the Lithuanian Jewry came to...
So in that respect, not so much changed, because the unique thing about South Africa, it's actually 100 years of Orthodoxy in Johannesburg. It's not South Africa. Cape Town is a whole different story. I didn't touch Cape Town. But the unique thing about Johannesburg, South African Jewry as a whole, is that they had the Quota Act in 1930 that didn't allow Jews to come to South Africa, and they did it in a clever way that Yiddish wasn't recognized as a European language, and therefore if you didn't have any other language you weren't allowed in. But then they didn't realize that there were a lot of German Jews who spoke German perfectly, and that's a European language, and that's how they managed to come to Stuttgart in 1936, and they closed the gap and didn't allow Germans either. But since that time there hasn't been mass immigration, hasn't happened at all. So the Johannesburg community, unlike Australia or England or America even, which was supplemented by a whole lot of Europeans coming into their country and changing the whole nature, the South African Jewry has basically remained homogenous since around 1920. There's just the influx of Lithuanians who came until 1930, closed off the borders, and since then, I mean, people came in drips and drabs, but there wasn't any community which arrived. So that's why it's interesting if you compare South African Jewry to other juries, because if, let's say, in Australia or England or America, if it's a much more religious community now than it was in the 30s, that's only because of the influx. But in South Africa, it's all internal. So that's the amazing thing, that it became more religious for the same population. So I'll try and go chronologically. I can speak for a while, but we'll see.
It's very true.
Yes. Yeah. So let's go back to. I can go back to 1900. I'll go back to 1915. In 1915, the Johannesburg new synagogue. I think it was called the Johannesburg. There was the old Orthodox Hebrew congregation and the Johannesburg Hebrew congregation. They split off in around the 1890s, but and there were two shuls which basically were very similar. They had like the English kind of design as well and English customs. They were founded by Englishmen. I mean, there were a few Lithuanians who'd been acculturated, but it was very English. And because of various reasons, Landau and Rabbi Hurst didn't get on with each other. So eventually in 1915, they amalgamated and they made the United Hebrew Congregation. That's where the original UHD comes from. And then Yeovil and Oxford and other shuls joined. But in 1915, there was the United Hebrew Congregation. In already the late 1890s, the Litvaks felt alienated by the whole English thing. So even the Johannesburg Hebrew Congregation wasn't good enough for them. They was slightly more religious than the Boston Old Hebrew Congregation. So they made their own Beis HaMedrash HaGadol, which started in Fox Street. And they had a Reverend Marshall Friedman. He was dying, Marshall Friedman, I should say. And we don't know much about him, unfortunately. They just say that he was a very nice man and everyone liked him, he was beloved, but there's no real history there. In 1915, the Beis HaMedrash always felt that they had to be on a par with the United Hebrew Congregation. So in 1915, Rabbi Landau he forged a deal with Rabbi Dan Marshall Friedman and I think Rachel Lipschitz. I don't know who he was exactly, but he's not well known. And they made a Beis Din. Rabbi Landau writes to Chacham Gasta, who was the head of the Sephardi congregation in London, saying that he's finally put a Beis Din together. And they put a Beis Din together in 1915. And the deal was that they're both co-Rosh Beis Din. They both have the same authorities over the Beis Din. That was the deal. Then around the late teens or whatever, or 1920 or something, a federation of synagogues under Rabbi Landau. So there was a provisional federation of Waterstrand, the synagogues of Rotterdam and then Transvaal. And that also starts to develop. Then in 1925,
was this the very first Beis Din?
Yeah, the first proper Beis Din. There were attempts at a Beis Din, but they always fell apart. So the first Johannesburg Beis Din, it was called the Johannesburg Beis Din, but it was the first Beis Din in South Africa. Cape Town didn't have a Beis Din yet. First Beis Din that was in 1915.
And did they have a Beis Din?
Yeah, the Beis Din, as I said, they was shared. The authority was shared between Rabbi Landau and.
So they're both.
They're both like co.
And just out of interest, did they have anyone from the other congregation that were associated with the Beis Din, or?
Well, that's the thing. The Beis HaMedrash HaGadol was Rabbi Dan Marshall Friedman, and the United Hebrew Congregation was Rabbi Landau. I don't know where Lipschitz was exactly. There were quite a few shuls then. These were the main shuls. But Margot Rubin writes a book about Jewish geography in Johannesburg, and how the shuls were. I mean, the Hasidim shul already started in 1911. There were a lot of shuls in the small areas. People couldn't get around.
Vegetables.
Yeah. And there was a Ponevezh shul as well. There were quite a lot of shuls, but these were the main ones.
And the Lion Shul?
The Lion Shul, that's Domfontein. Yeah, I think that was around as well. But Fox Street is quite far away. There aren't in Domfontein. Walmart also isn't. Although Walmart is close. So then you had then in 1925, Dan Marshall Friedman passes away suddenly in 62. So the Beis HaMedrash HaGadol now are Lithuanians, but they are more cultured Lithuanians, and they're getting wealthier, and they're not just the poor Lithuanians they want a nice big shul. They don't want Fox Street. So they want to build another shul, and they want a Rav, and they want the Federation of Synagogues to help finance getting someone from Europe, because it's very expensive to get someone from Europe. So the United Hebrew Congregation are very upset. The deal was with Rabbi, as far as they saw it, was with Zion Marshall Friedman. Once he's not alive, Landau can take over. He can be the Rosh Basin of everyone. If they want another venue, because Fox Street and so nice, they can come. Walmart will give them like a hall, and they can dive in there, separate. So the whole thing, they withdraw from the Federation of Synagogues, United Hebrew Congregation, even though they're the main constituents, and it fights back and forth. Eventually, they come back because they realize that they're going to lose the battle, the United Hebrew Congregation. Meanwhile, the Beis Hamikdash Gadol creates this lovely shul in Saratoga Avenue, and they bring out Bered HaChagim, which is that competition for. I don't know if Alta was there, I don't know who was it.
I think they even used to call the shul the Bered HaChagim.
Yeah, the Bered HaChagim shul, that's right. And so you have this competition there, and then eventually, and they always wanted to bring out Rabbi Kosovsky, and eventually comes in 1933. I suppose he resisted, but it was things were getting bad in Europe. He came out. He thought, when he comes to Johannesburg, he thought, sure, that calls himself Beis Hamikdash Gadol, the Johannesburg Orthodox Hebrew Congregation. He's coming to like a very frum shul. He was very, very disappointed when he arrived in South Africa.
So I think he came from Vilna. He was
He was the brother-in-law of the Chaim Isaac Grudzinski,
which is a very questionable.
very, very the hugest, like the Gadol Ador of the generation. He's his brother-in-law, and he himself inherited the position of Rav Chaim Oiz's father. When Rav Chaim Oiz's father passed away, he was also a big Rav. He was a Rav then, and he went to another shul. And he was probably like the most qualified Rav that's ever come from Lithuania. I mean, you had, I don't know Rav Amovich. Rav Amovich was quite a big Talmid Chacham. He was a very big Talmid Chacham. He came to Cape Town. I'm not sure if he was on the same level as Rabbi Kosovsky. But definitely, John Marshall Friedman, we don't know much about. There was Rabbi Rosenzweig, who was on the basin as well. Big Talmid Chacham, but he came very young to South Africa. His parents had already been there. He was, this Rav Kosovsky was a Stott Rav. He was a city Rav in Poland. He was involved in Aguda there. He was a force to be reckoned with. So he came, and he had to share. His official title was the Rav of the Federation of Synagogues, and Rosh Basin of the Basin, and Rabbi Landau was the chief rabbi. And they had an uneasy relationship. I mean, I can go into details, but I'll go before. But
can I just mention
yes.
something, because it will showcase what a special Rav he was.
Yeah.
When he came to Cape Town and he went on the train going to Johannesburg.
Right.
So I've heard this from somebody who wrote the biography. They translated it. He had his secretary with him on the train, and he asked him when he got to Joburg if he could take him to the train driver. I don't know if you've heard this.
No.
And he took him to the train driver, and he went to the train driver and he said, "I want to thank you."
Oh wow.
And the train driver said, "For what?" He said, "For bringing us safely here."
Right.
And the train driver turned around and said, "I brought kings, I brought diplomats. No one has ever come to thank me."
Yeah, wow.
That's the type of
Yeah. So then Rabbi Kosovsky came there, and there were certain issues that when he was very insistent in 1938, I think, I forgot exactly the date, but there was a conference of the South African Board of Jewish Education, They wanted to bring out a director who was conservative, with a big C, from the conservative movement, and he was vehemently against it. And I don't know if he was rude or something, but they removed him from the session, and it was a terrible thing. And then he rejoined the Board of Education, and eventually Rabbi Zlotnick came. That's Rabbi Zlotnick. He was Teachers Training College. They called it after his name afterwards. When he came, he was a Mizrahi rabbi, but very learned and intellectual. Just backtracking a bit, when he came in 1933, his only real colleagues that he could find were Mizrahi. Now we think of Mizrahi, and when I thought there was a mistake that I didn't research things, and the Mizrahi is, but power of whatever. But then the Mizrahi were the religious, they were the only ones spreading anything Jewish or spreading ideas. And already then, I mean, there wasn't any such thing as kiruv or anything like that, or outreach. But there were boys who were not connected at all, and they managed to get them on a Shabbos afternoon. And there were quite a few people who became from through them, in a small amount, but people also. That's what I used. There was an article called 60 Years of Mizrahi or something in '62 by Joe Green, and it was more from the working class families that the vernacular youth started there, and they were very fond of him, and they made him like honorary president of Mizrahi, and he was very popular with them. Whereas he didn't ever really get along with the community at large, because his English wasn't so good, and he was too firm for them. And anyway, in
even to this day, Yeshiva College is
yes, Yeshiva's based in In 1941, he was very upset. It was the Second World War. His kids were. His daughter and I forgot who. His daughter's husband was also a famous Rav. I think they passed away in the Holocaust. But his son, Rav Michal, was born from his second wife, so he wasn't a nephew of Rav Chaim Ozer, but he was close to him. But he brought him out to South Africa. And Rav Michal must have been quite amazing, because he came to South Africa with no English. And about 5 years later, he got a doctorate from UNISA. Went to Bertzen and UNISA and this and that. He got like a philosophy thing, because he realized that in order to have some kind of prestige, you need that kind of thing. Even though he wasn't a masculine in any way, he was very much like the Litvish. It's interesting that his wife published ideas of his after he passed away, Rabbi Kosovsky, and I think she writes in the introduction, if I remember somewhere, I forgot where, that he loved writing in Hebrew. He loved Hebrew. He spoke in English as well, obviously. But if he would think about if it was about the Holocaust, about things, and then he would switch to Yiddish, because that was his Mama Lashon, obviously. So he came in 41. In 42, I think Rabbi Landau passes away, and they're looking for a new chief rabbi. Negotiating for a new chief rabbi, they ask Rabbi Hertz. Rabbi Hertz recommends Rabbi Rabinowitz. Hertz is already old then, but he knows the South African community because he was there from like 1898 to 1911, I think. So then Rabbi Rabinowitz arrives, and Rabbi Kosovsky thinks, just like Rabbi Landau thought earlier, that the deal about sharing the Beis Din and sharing that would be with Rabbi Landau, the person, not with the rabbi of the United Hebrew Congregation. Rabbi Rabinowitz was quite a genius. He was a very well-learned man, but he never left London. Or correctly England. I think he was born in Edinburgh, but he never left England. He never went to, or Britain at least, he never went to Europe to study. He studied at Jews College or Eitz Chaim, but he didn't have that yeshivish heft. And Rabbi Kosovsky couldn't believe that he would have to share Beis Din with someone so junior. So he wrote to Rabbi Herzog to tell the Johannesburg Jewish community, because he thought Rabbi Herzog has some kind of authority to stop this, and he was very upset. And Rabbi Rabinovitz insisted, though, because if you want to get respect, he has to be a co-head of the Beis Din. And Rabbi Rabinovitz was interesting because he came to South Africa, and he was well known to be quite he had very high self-confidence, let's say. When he came to South Africa, he was a few weeks in South Africa, they invited him to speak at a Mizrahi. And Mizrahi at that time they made a resolution that they wanted Shomei Atzair, which was very like communist and anti-religious and that, they wanted them out of the South African Federation. They wanted to have a resolution. And he said, what they think they're doing is right, you think you're doing it right, you have no right to remove an organization. And he told us, and with Rabbi Kosowski there, who's making the motion, he didn't care, he just said it like, so it didn't I don't know if it was a good start for their relationship, but that's how it starts. So Rabbi Rabinovitz says, I mean, I won't go into that because that didn't go into the thing, but Rabbi Rabinovitz was well known to be a very brave guy. He threw his medals once on the floor. He was
with the British.
No, the British, yes. He didn't mince his words. He knew where he stood. So they had a difficult relationship, but Rabbi Kosowski was already old then. The tensions, I don't know, I mean, we make this into a personal thing, but the tensions between the two sides were more highlighted with Rav Michal and Rabbi Rabinovitz, because I think they were about the same age. So Rabbi Yitzchak Kosowski passes away in 1951. Now, I'll just backtrack a little bit. With my thesis, what I did was I categorized, based on some other historian in America called Jeffrey Gurok, who makes a distinction between the Rabbonim who arrived in America, who were accommodators. In other words, they realized that they had congregations which weren't observant, and as much as possible they try and understand their things and try in the communal space at least to make everything orthodox and make sure everything's right, but not to put too much pressure on the congregants themselves. So eventually the congregants will get closer to Yiddishkeit, but not put any pressure, not use any coercion or anything like that. But that's the on the one side, the accommodators. On the other side, in America they call them resistors, but these, you can't really, it's the wrong term for South Africa, I call traditionalists. The way Rav Kosowski very much, and Mizrahi as well, very much pushed learning more, becoming more from individual improvement, that kind of thing, and and maybe not as concerned about the community, but more on the private observance side. Those are the traditionalists on the one side, and you had let's backtrack again. In 1945, I think, there was a whole discussion of they wanted to build a day school. It was already overdue to have a Jewish day school, and there was a big debate whether it should be strictly national traditional or broadly national traditional. Now let me explain. National means Zionistic. That wasn't a problem. Traditional means Orthodox. Now broadly national traditional means that it's a broadly religious but not confined to anything. Strictly would be strictly Orthodox. So Rabbi Yitzchak Kosowski represented on the board meeting, he represented the Beis Moshe Gadol, whereas Rabbi Michal Kosowski represented Mizrahi. And they both came out very forcefully for strictly national traditional. Everyone else, and there were different parties there, and Habonim I think was represented, and even the revisionists, everyone else were very against this, the clerical domination, what's going on, that's who broadly, and they won. They beat Rabbi Kosowski and Rabbi Michal Kosowski had to. It was decided that the prospective school King David would be broadly national traditional. It wouldn't be strictly. But I think that might have helped because in 1950, Rabbi Michal Kosowski, his father's still alive, but he's old already, decides that they are going to make a yeshiva katana. He called the yeshiva katana at first, and then it was called Bnei Akiva Yeshiva, then eventually called Yeshiva College, formerly Bnei Akiva Yeshiva. And they make this had they won, or had they conceded even, they would have just said, just strictly, okay, we'll go along with these rabbis. It wouldn't have become, but they wouldn't have had that motivation. So now Yeshiva College just comes into existence. Right? I mean, I don't go into the whole history of Yeshiva College, but first it's just an after-school thing. There were a few, actually, they even started teaching in a university a bit, and there was a workman's thing for like a year. They taught in various places. Rabbi Bronner, who came just for his father's businesses, he was tremendously helpful there. And Rabbi Newman helped a bit, and there were other Rabbanim who helped. But
Rabbi Fogel, was he involved at this time?
And I don't think he arrived yet. 1950? No, I don't think so. But then you had, but Rabbi Michal was the Rosh Yeshiva, and Rabbi Sanders very soon after, 54 I think, became the dean. I think it was 54 to 62. So then you have Yeshiva College.
And you had people like Rabbi Shushad.
Yes, Rabbi Shushad, that's right. And someone Katz, what's his name? He taught at Kfar Ro'eh for many years. He was one of the four. They started
very small in the beginning.
Yes. Interestingly, so this is where there's a bit of conflict between Rabbi Rabinowitz on the one hand and Rav Michal Kosovsky on the other hand. Rav Michal Kosovsky believed that you have to restore Lithuanian Jewry to its rightful place, that there should be a real yeshiva atmosphere, and that if you want Rabbanim, or if you want from people to come back to South Africa, they must be trained in a proper yeshiva. And that's why he sent off. He didn't even send them to Israel. He sent Rabbi Sushard and Ben Isaacson to Telz, and I think Katz to Nei Yisrael, and sent someone else to Nei Yisrael. He sent them to America, to American yeshivas. And whereas Rabbi Rabinowitz was of the belief, being a graduate of Jews College, that you need a rabbi's training college. It's funny, Lionel Mervis was one of the graduates there. There were a few. Rabbi Dan Isaacs was there. Rabbi Mazaba. Ben Isaacson came back from America, and he came very close to Rabbi Rabinowitz, and he did their course. And there was this guy who recently wrote a book, Rabbi Sadalsky or something from. He went to but not many, but there were.
Sadalsky, he lives here.
Right. Yes. There were quite a few rabbis, but not that many. But they had the rabbis training college.
Rabbi Lepin, how does he fit in?
So Rabbi Lepin was already. Rabbi Lepin, I think, had gone to Europe to learn.
Yeah, he came back. He went back to Europe.
He went back to Europe, or he was born, I think, in the Cape or something. But he went to Europe. He was studying in Europe. He wasn't so much connected. He was much more a Talmud of Rabbi Kosovsky than of Rabbi Rabinowitz. And he had his own shitzes, I think. So there was a big like disagreement, it seems, between Rabbi Kosovsky did not believe in all this rabbi's training college. He thought they would make like second-rate rabbanim, whereas Rabbi Rabinowitz thought he'd accept anyone, people who'd been in yeshiva as well, but that you need a special kind of seminary because they understand what South African Jewry is all about. And that was the argument that Rabbi Newman also made. Rabbi Jacob Newman, he was like a country communities rabbi, then he was Rabbi Waverley, I think at Sea Point, and then he came to Jerusalem. He was also the Rabbanim, and what was the rabbi of the Hebrew Training College? The name escapes me. He was very famous. He was the rabbi of Hasidim Shul. escapes me for the moment. But he taught Gemara there. And Rabbi Rapport taught a bit. Rabbi Sali Rapport was a professor of Hebrew at Wits. He also taught at this Rabbi's Training College. They made a Rabbi's Training College, but didn't this in the late 50s.
And can I ask, Rabbi Eloi?
Rabbi Eloi had already been there for. Rabbi Eloi, I think, was at that time the registrar
of the
Beis Din. Even in the time Rabbi Yitzchak Kosovsky. And then I think maybe the time of Michal, and eventually becomes a Dayan. But Rabbi Rosenzweig was the Ab Beis Din after Rabbi Yitzchak Kosovsky passes away. And Rabbi Michal Kosovsky is one of the senior Dayanim as well. Together with Rabbi Rabinovitz.
And can I ask, Reform?
Yes.
How does this fit in?
So Reform I think started around 1933. I'm not sure. They were also when the Stuttgart came. They were. The Reform plays I didn't go into Reform a lot, but Rabbi Landau was friendly with MCY, even though he wasn't pro-Reform in any way. He didn't want Reform to influence things, but he was Viennese and he had this cultural thing, whereas Rabbi Kosovsky was much more anti-Reform. The traditionalists were like viscerally against Reform, whereas Rabbi Rabinovitz was also against Reform. Rabbi Rabinovitz stormed into a meeting once, as well known, and he said they're creating mamzerim. He was upset with them, but I think he understood them better. He tried to actually accommodate them more than Rabbi Kosovsky. When Rabbi Rabinovitz left South Africa in 1961, so Ben Isaacson was in Bloemfontein, and he allowed the Reform Rabbi to say Mariv or something, and the Jewish observer went wild on him, and you should go back to his seminary and his rabbi, and there was a bit of there was a tension between Rabbi Rabinovitz even when he was in Israel, because he was actually giving interviews about how the South African community is a bit too compliant with apartheid, and Rabbi Kosovsky got very upset about that, Rabbi Michal Kosovsky. So there was a bit of tension there between Rabbi Kosovsky and Rabbi Rabinovitz.
But I just must mention with Rabbi Rabinovitz, they say there was once a dinner that wasn't kosher.
Yes. It was
against that.
It was the Minsk or something, the anniversary. They both went together actually.
Yeah.
Rabbi Rabinovitz and Rabbi. They heard about it. Yeah. They heard that they weren't using the kosher caterers, and they went into the dining room as they were about to eat, and they said this food is treif. They went in, they went out, but I think people carried on eating afterwards. And someone said, no, they're mistaken.
But they made a
statement. No, okay, so let's just go back. If you're saying that, Rabbi Rabinovitz and all the rabbis who are called accommodators were very strict about maintaining the public space to be. Rabbi Rabinovitz was the first person. And I think in England they don't even enforce this. Rabbi Rabinovitz, it's obvious now to us in South Africa, but Rabbi Rabinovitz is the first person to insist that if you're going to have a wedding, he will not attend the wedding if it's not kosher caterers. Yeah. So he was very insistent on that, and I think he improved the kashrus in South Africa as much as possible. But that's a separate issue. He wasn't in charge of the butchers or the charge of the shachtim, but he wanted the public space to be from, and he also spoke about keeping Shabbos, but he took a bit of a different approach to. Firstly, there's a famous psak, and go into it, but I'll say quickly that he allowed people playing sports on Shabbos. It's in Rabbi Mazzo's book, and he says in one of his things he's against people like shopping on Shabbos, but he understands that people who can't afford, if it's economically not viable, he understands why they would go to.
Can I just mention on this?
Sure.
The Lion Shaw had an early Shabbos.
In order to go at 6.
So people would come for the early minyan and then go to work. And Wolf Rosenberg, the famous rugby player,
right?
His father was a Rav.
Wow. Yeah.
And so it fits in exactly.
Yeah. But he there was an understanding, and Rabbi Newman also wrote a few articles about understanding the spiritual side, trying to raise spirituality, because they're not going to be, they never foresaw what South Africa would become, or Johannesburg at least. So that was the approach. It was a very different approach.
But I think with reform, it was never very strong. The
Reform was never strong.
The percentage was very
never
low.
that strong. No, not that
It wasn't
strong.
very influential within the broad community either.
No, although I mean I've seen in other research that I've done, there were quite a few influential people on the board of deputies, and Edgar Bernstein was one of like the deputy editor of the Jewish Times, and he was reform. But yeah, so you had that this division. It's still most of Johannesburg Jewry is more after the accommodated camp, and then the 1960s come. Rabbi Brunwitz leaves. Ksovsky dies very young, age 56 or something, in 1964, and slowly. So I've noticed that part of the advantage of my thesis that other people haven't covered is that there was a journal, a Hebrew journal called Barakai, which was published in Johannesburg from 1937 to 1977, when the editor passed away, Jack Rubik, and hardly anyone has looked at it because not many people have a good command of Hebrew, but I managed to. And the advantage of that Hebrew thing is that people, when they wrote, they were very free in what they said because they knew not a lot of people were reading it. So it was almost like complaints, and Rabbanim saying what a hefkevelt it is, and how they're all mocking the bar mitzvah boys who just came once, and it was very interesting. So I had that source, which I thought was a very good source. Then in the 60s, if we move ahead, in 1965, there were three incidents that happened that sort of turned the tide a bit towards the traditionalists. Already now, apartheid, the world is becoming more aware of apartheid, because decolonization is like the 50s, South Africa is not really a prior state, but in the 60s already it's becoming less and less. So already you're not attracting Rabbanim who have of the liberal mindset of the type of Rabbi Rabinowitz or Rabbi Rappaport. People are going to be more, the American Rabbanim don't care, the Israeli Rabbanim certainly don't care, but the more liberal type, the more English kind are going to be a bit more hesitant to come to South Africa. So already you have Rabbanim.
Already at Chopville was...
that's right, yeah.
But you're right, it only became more...
Yes.
A bit later.
So you're already deterring these rabbis of the accommodator, universalist rabbis who could quote you, and they were rabbi doctor and professors and this and that. And you had more like Shivish Rabbanim who would come, because it didn't occur to them so much. They didn't mind. They were spreading Yiddishkeit. So already then the orientation of the Rabbanim is changing, it's tilting a bit towards more traditionalism rather than accommodation. In 1965, there's three incidents that happen. All around the Chagim time, I don't think. Rabbi Bernard is invited. Harry Abt was I think his son is in Harnof. Don't know if he's still around. Abt. Jerusalem Calling. What's
his daughter as well? His daughter.
Right.
Is in the Gush.
Oh. What's Tova Abt? No,
Tova Rubenstein.
No, that's Rabbi Bernard's daughter.
Rabbi Bernard.
Talking about Harry Abt was the...
Harry Abt, I know, but Rabbi...
Yeah. No, of course. So I don't know. Yeah. So but Harry Abt was the rabbi there, and he was a reverend more. He was a German, whatever. So Rabbi Bernard was invited to South Africa. And he had just come back, he had just been back in New York from Kansas, because in Kansas there wasn't any school for his kids. And now he's being invited to South Africa, he doesn't know what to do. So So he goes to South Africa and he looks around, and the Rav Soloveitchik said, look, make sure that there's good chinuch there. But he couldn't find good chinuch, and he suggested a bit that maybe he'll start his own school. But South Africans don't know starting their own school. So he's thinking about South Africa, and Rav Soloveitchik tells him, if you have a doubt, there's a little Lubavitcher Rebbe. You can ask him, maybe consult with him, because he knows these things. He sends people out. He never met the Lubavitcher Rebbe before then. He goes to the Lubavitcher Rebbe for a thing. He says, I don't have my vineyard. He said, you have to create your own vineyard. Go to South Africa and you'll succeed. So he goes to South Africa, and then I think Yom Kippur morning, I'm not sure exactly, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, he announces in Shul by the beginning of 1966. This is already September 65. He's making his own shul, his own school.
Was he already the Rav of Oxford?
The Rav of Oxford. He accepted the position. They asked him, came there, said, I'm making my own school.
And it was Menorah
Oxford. So the reaction of the Jewish Times, they go wild. I mean, what's this new young 30-year-old, 32-year-old, whatever, American rabbi doing his own... Yeshiva College they had in the works that they were going to do Glen Hazel Primary School. It was going to open in 67. Suddenly this guy swoops in, doesn't like any of that education. Why can't he send his kids to King David? Says, for my daughters, they need a special, who's this guy? But he attracts the attention of Rav Zaltzer. Rav Zaltzer is very impressed that there's this YU rabbi here who the Frum standards aren't good enough for him and they have a very close relationship. Rav Zaltzer and Rav Zaltzer himself wanted to open. He opened in 67 or 66 also. He opened Torah Emes, but he also has this like separatist ideology, and they connect very well. And he sends the children from Adas. We used to go to Adas Ched in the afternoon, and would go to a non-Jewish school rather than Yeshiva College. He sends them to Menorah Oxford. So Menorah Oxford had like 13 people or something in the first year. That's grade 1 to standard 1. They had a very small intake.
And I just had to mention that my Rav, I don't want to mention the name, but he went to Yovel Boys. He didn't go to Yeshiva College.
Right.
Which it's hard to understand, but that's the mindset.
Yeah. So that's one big incident that happens. The other two is Rabbi Pupko comes to Sinem Shul. South Africa is a very Zionist community, and he starts saying that the Zionist youth are like kappas and weird things. And he starts a whole huge fight with the Jewish Times, and the Jewish Times write back, and there's whole letter pages, and he tells people not to get their subscriptions. Eventually he has to apologize, but he doesn't really, for some reason he's popular, but he's also already breaking because they can't get rid of him, and no one wants to. It's a few people resign from Sydenham, but already you see that the stranglehold on Orthodox Jewry is loosening from the accommodator side. The other third incident, which was very interesting, is that Rabbi Newman, who's also a accommodator rabbi, he's a rabbi of Waverley, he writes a letter out of nowhere, we don't know what the incident was, that people from Bnei Akiva are questioning the kashrut authorities. They have no right to question the kashrut authorities. They don't know what they're doing. They must just listen to who the religious authorities are. And Bnei Akiva is a good movement and this and that, but these upstarts, who they think they are. So Rav Bronner writes back very, very fiercely, like, how dare you start attacking the only movement that's spreading Torah and this and that, and that they help you in Waverley Shul, and how can you say that? And what you're doing is nothing more than Chilul Hashem. It's going back and forth. And there's letter writers coming, and they say they work from Bnei Akiva, and Bnei Akiva is not so good, and they don't know anything, and there are people supporting Bnei Akiva. I think Elos wanted to write a letter, and who's this Rabbi Bronner? And he wasn't the official rabbi, but eventually there's a truce there. But the interesting thing about this is that it shows you a lot of letter writers are saying about Bnei Akiva that Bnei Akiva are Bnei Akiva are Natura Karta, they're Meish Orim, they should go back, they're fanatics, But it shows you the feeling that it wasn't that Bnei Akiva were actually obviously making an impression, and they're obviously considered much frummer. You know, we think in terms of the 70s, 80s, Bnei Akiva is like a mainstream, but it isn't mainstream. They're the ones who are trying to they are rocking the boat kind of thing in religion, and who thinks anyway. So that's so those three incidents, like almost cumulative in 65. In 66, I'll try to go a bit quicker now. In 66, Rabbi Zaltzer decides, at the urging of his brother-in-law, Rav Tzvi Lieberman, he decides that he's going to make a kollel. They call it a kollel. At that time, Rabbi Krusag was in South Africa. He was doing the teacher. He was the rabbi or assistant rabbi of the rabbis training college. Involved a bit in the Beis Din, but more educational side. JSAP, I think he develops a bit later in the early 70s, but that's his job.
His father-in-law, Rabbi Elo,
I think by then he was dying. It wasn't our Beis Din. Our Beis Din was Rabbi Rosenzweig. Rosenzweig's older. Rosenzweig died in 1970.
Okay.
So Rabbi Kursag, he's living in like I think he's living in a flat somewhere, like near Observatory, or probably near where his father-in-law lives. His father-in-law lived in Harley Street in Yeovil, and so he goes to the Adas because that's like the fromest community. So he's also part of this kollel. The kollel, what is a kollel? The kollel is 2 days a week. They have 3-hour sessions of learning. You had advanced learning because they had Mushlachim coming the whole time. Simchas Yisrael Brody, huge Rabbanim came. The Panomish Rav, and they were giving Rabbanim is Panomish Rav. They're giving shiurim to like advanced people, and they invite. It's the first time that I think, because of Rabbi Bernard's influence, it must be Rabbi Zaltzer suddenly opens a das to the rest of the community. So they invite anyone who wants to come learn. So you have like Rabbi Brooks from Umerencha and other people coming. Talmidei Chachamim, who were old, who weren't necessarily that from, but they were coming and they're learning a serious thing, and he would like run a beginners course for the rest of the community. Rabbi Zaltzer and Rabbi Kasper also, they gave like shiurim and that, and
Rabbi Kasper, the chief rabbi.
Rabbi Kasper was the chief rabbi at the time, yeah.
And I must just mention, Rav Kutztag, he learnt in Hebron.
In Hebron, yeah.
In the old Hebron, in Gola.
Yes, right.
So he was very learned.
Yes, no, of course, they're very learned. Yes. And he had Dionysus as well. Yeah. So they produce a journal called the Kollel Journal. I think in 1967. It's called the Kollel, and I don't know if it's ironic or not because it's a big sugya in Shas, but they're talking about Avodim. It's in South Africa, and they're talking about the sugya of Avodim. I don't know if it's like. I don't know if you can read anything into that. They've got like an article by Rav Simchas Yisrael Brody and an article by Rav Kursag in Hebrew, and I think an article in English by Rav Zaltzer. I'm not sure. It's called the Kollel. It's like a blue journal, and they published it. But and it gets and the Jewish Tribune, which is a very frum newspaper, they say, wow, they're bringing Yiddishkeit back to South Africa. There's already 67 only. But the kollel isn't so successful. People don't come. The ones who are not so learned don't come. So they think they have to do something else. So Rav Tzvi Lieberman, he's like really pushing this thing all the time. And Rav Zaltzer knows about Gateshead because he sent his daughters to the Gateshead seminary. And that time was a big sacrifice. They would go for like 3 years, not going back to South Africa.
The expense involved.
Right, exactly. His oldest daughter, the late Kayla, she married Rabbi Steinhaus, and he brings Rabbi Steinhaus in 1968 to South Africa to teach his son Rabbi Yossi Zaltzer in Torah Semis. That was part of the reason why Torah Semis was open, because he wanted a school for. So he's already got the Gateshead influence. You know, he learnt in Presburg in Hungary, but he knows about Gateshead. Maybe he visited there once. So Rabbi Lieberman goes to Gateshead to recruit people, they decide they're going to have a real kollel, not just kollel by name, but a kollel where people learn the whole day. And the condition is that 1 hour a day or something you have to learn with members of the community, and 1 hour a week you give public lectures. So they go to Gated, and they agree with the head of thing, the Rabbi Shakavitsky, who was the rabbi of Leeds then, and Rabbi Krasner, who was like I think he was teaching at the boys' high school, at the boarding school, and Rabbi Hassan, who was looking for a place of a kollel, but he very hard to get into kollels in those days because there were hardly any of them. There's maybe Gateshead in Manchester or something. He wanted a place in a kollel, so they were kollel there. They bring them to South Africa. Already Rabbi Steinhaus is already in South Africa, and Rabbi Korn was brought out by Adas Yeshurun as the youth leader. When they go to see him in England, apparently, this I've heard, didn't confirm with Korn has passed away, unfortunately, but Walter Zeliger, when he's recruited, he's like Mark Korn, he's a clean-shaven guy. He comes on the ship, he goes via Israel, stays in Israel 3 months, gets very, very, very involved with Satmar, comes, he's got a long beard, and he's like a very frum Rav, and he's arguing with them the whole time on Shabbos because there's a mixed Kiddush and this and that. So Korn also, they're all part of the kollel. The kollel opened in 1970.
I just want to mention something. When I was in Yeovil, so Rabbi Korn, I remember Rabbi Korn very well in Young
Hunter Street,
he was the only person that was in full-time learning.
Yes.
And we couldn't, as kids, none of us, even the very
he had a little shed there, he was just learning and learning.
None of us could comprehend that how could somebody sit and learn the whole day.
Yeah.
It was so foreign that I knew no one who could understand it.
Right.
Thought, it's Meshuggah.
Yeah, but it made him a great Pesach. He was...
But it just shows you the times.
Yeah, no, of course. So then Rabbi Kabel Bacha is a big Talmud or thing of Rabbi Zalta, and he goes to Adas. So Rabbi Zalta asks him, they read out the kollel. That time it was in Adas Yeshurun, they 3 hours a week, but you can't have a whole institution in Adas. It just doesn't fit there. So he gives him his father's home called Sali Bacha, or Shaul Bacha. So that's what Kol Yad Shaul. They call it Kol Yad Shaul. They open on the 1st of Elul, 2nd of September 1970. That's when they open, and they decide it's a real kollel. You want to discuss any other matters, like matters of like the community and that, you have to go outside. We're here to learn. And it starts off very nicely. Then Rabbi Hassan, they want to get more people involved. Rabbi Hassan writes in the Hebrew notices, in the Star, the classified thing, they have Hebrew notices. He's offering a shiur for a lesser or whatever. I don't know what shiur, whatever you want to be. Anyone wants to be involved in religious discussion. Suddenly 20 people pitch up. Not girls, men and women.
And Rabbi Hassan used to give lectures at Wits.
Right. No, so then that's he starts there, and then he goes to Wits afterwards. And very quickly they go to Wits.
I attended some of his lectures.
Right. They go to Wits, and Rabbi Sanders also joins them. He's not in. Rabbi Sanders is very impressed with Rabbi Shakavitsky. Rabbi also goes to Wits, and there's about like 40 different shiurim a week or something like that in Joburg, around Johannesburg. They decide, it's funny because already in 1972, I discovered this in the Biachar archives, in 1972, as early as March 1972, Rabbi Lipsky had just arrived. And already then, the Board of Deputies invited them to discuss the students. In other words, they already had some kind of influence on the students as early as 72. But around 72, they decide they're going to have a Monday evening shiurim. All the shiurim, instead of being in a whole lot of places, will be in the Kol Yad Shaul in Urania Street. And apparently like 80 to 100 people come every Monday. Like, cause, the Sleepy Roads or thing, you can't find parking there, and people are like standing outside because they can't hear, and they're listening to this shiurim. And Rabbi Sanders is very inspirational, Rabbi Hassan as well. Rosh Hashanah gives also a few shiurim, Rabbi. Krasner gives, but the main Rosh Kavitsky is quite inspirational. But the main guys are Rabbi Hassan and Rabbi Salmons, I think. They're the driving force there. And it's like a big excitement. And when guest speakers come, there's like 200 people there. It's like so that's the kollel. And then, but at the same time, like unlike Or Sameach and that, where you're allowed certain things, they're very strict kollel. But because people are searching, they're willing to just become from completely, and they'll wear jackets and hats and only daven with an Ashkenazi accent at the if you're davening at the Amud, you have to daven with an Ashkenazi accent. There's no way that people can drive to shul. They don't allow that kind of thing, but people come and they get attracted. They get attracted, especially Rabbi Tass was telling me that the Friday night meals was the really people from that Das would accommodate them for Friday nights, and that really attracted. That had kind of a big attraction to these students. And I taught them Michtam Eliyahu, and Rabbi. It's important to mention Avin Ziskin was very involved. Avin Ziskin was he lives in England, an architect who did a postgraduate degree in architecture in the University of Durham, which is very near Gateshead, in the 60s. So purely by chance, this guy from Benoni comes. I mean, he came from like an observant background, sort of, but he was involved in Rabbanim. But
and then B'nai Akiva.
Yes, B'nai Akiva. Yeah, B'nai Akiva. He was roped into B'nai Akiva, of course, sure. Yeah, I think maybe Danny Berry was his father. I don't know. Someone was involved in bringing him over to B'nai Akiva, but he comes to Gates. He's never experienced this kind of thing before. But that's where he met Rabbi Shakavitsky, and he met all these guys, and they like introduced him. So he's a very enthusiastic participant. He couldn't believe that they would be able to be successful in bringing our Gated guys to South Africa. But because he's so enthusiastic, firstly I think he built an extra room in his house in Uranus Street, which was or very near the kollel, so that more people could sleep over Shabbos. And he sits into all the shiurim, and if he realizes that he sits in front, and if he realizes that he thinks the audience won't understand these like English Rabbanim, because I mean they're speaking to a high level, he rephrases the question so that they can, and eventually they ask him to talk, and he uses Rabbi Victor Miller tapes and other things, and he brings over his thing, and he's very, very popular there as well. At the same time, in 72, Koppel Bacha brings out Rabbi Mendel Lipska, together with Rabbi Bernard. They bring out Rabbi Mendel Lipska, and he comes in the beginning of 72.
Who was Chabad.
And this Hasidim shul that he takes over is not from shul at all. Rabbi Chazan was telling me that his father much preferred to daven in B'nai Akiva Yovel than in the Hasidim shul, because the Hasidim shul had like people with Hasidic heritage, but they wore top hats. No one had a beard. No kapotzos, nothing. And this rabbi comes and they don't know who this. So just quickly, I'll tell you the story that Rabbi Chazan said. In Rabbi Chazan is this young, but very impressive. This very energetic. Every Wednesday night he's having farbrengens, and they're getting a bit tipsy, but it's very like he's got like a flat in Hillbrow or something nearby, and he's getting his Hasidim around, and on Rosh Hashanah that year, a guy comes in to Hasidim shul. He's got like masses of like reggae kind of hairstyles and that, and like jeans, and he tells the Gaboim, give him psicha. I can give him psicha. Look what he's wearing. I don't know. He's like a hippie, That was the style then. So give him. They look at him and looks and stuff. Okay, this happens. The next year comes around. Yom Kippur morning. Rabbi Lipska gets up and he says, last year this rabbi came and you all looked at him, smirks and this and that. Since then he's been in yeshiva in America. I forgot exactly which yeshiva, and he's becoming involved in this and that. Said, there were two there were two goats who in the times of Beis Hamikdash, who one would go Azazel, and what's the difference between the two of them? And look where he's come since then, and look where you, and this like blew away like Chazan and Gerari was there as well. They passed away, I think, the oldest Gerari, and they became very attached to him, and this like made them want to be like, you know, shlichim and involved, and then he goes to checkers in Yovel and ask people they're Jewish, and Sheker Lulav, they bring like the sukkah thing, and this is like in South Africa, no one. And the show like when
at Wits University they bought it.
Right.
They've never been inside.
Yes. And like he was telling me, Chazan, that his father once, before Orthodoxy arrived, once was like walking with his lulav and estrog, and some reverend said, and this is like a completely different. And you have to, are you Jewish? They're not used to this, but that's the Chabad thing. So Chabad is like very opposite, because they advertise everything. Whereas Koral, very low key, but they managed to attract. In 76, like Rabbi Lipsky already has too much to do, so he calls Rabbi Goldman. Rabbi Goldman comes from Chabad House.
This is Yossi Goldman.
Yossi Goldman already, I think within 3 months, he's doing the Jewish sound. No, suddenly Jewish radio every Sunday night.
I think he did it through Swaziland.
Swazi radio, because Izzy Kirsch at the time had an international hour or something, so I think he gave them like a free thing, and they used to have like big reels, and they used to like tape them and then transfer them to take them to.
And this was revolutionary at the time to have a Jewish radio station that you could hear Jewish things on the radio.
Right. Yeah. And and also he's doing like plays as well, and he's acting, and someone else, I think Bregman or something, someone helps him there. They do like, and he's interviewing like any Rabbanu would come through, and interviews like Bonacham David, interviews a whole lot of people, and this also like and people are listening from around the country. They're getting calls from everywhere, like, what is this thing, the Shas, the Gemara, what is that? And then in 1980 they had this big Lag B'Omer parade, the whole of Yovel, this huge thing. So that's Lubavitch and Koral. I'll go quickly because.
Can I just mention? You don't have to go quickly.
Yes. Okay.
I think is so important. Is you have mentioned Gerari.
Yes.
He was the brother-in-law to Rav Kutz.
Yes.
Because Rav Eloi's two daughters.
Yes, right. Patya and Winnie, yeah.
And I think that's why the community also had the Abbeis Din with two daughters, one Chabad and one.
Yeah. The ironic thing is that there was a bit of tension between Kollel and Chabad, because Chabad was a bit of an easier way, and therefore Kollel, it seems that a few families who had become from and concentrated on, they suddenly become Chabad. So there's a bit of tension there.
I remember the tension in Yovel. There was. People wouldn't go to each other's shuls at one time even.
But the interesting thing is that the Kollel was, the house of the Kollel was Kol Vacha's father's house. And when they originally opened the Kollel, when they inaugurated the home, it's not the Kollel yet, Rabbi Weinberg, who used to come every year, Rav Shalom Weinberg's father, he was the guest rabbi, and he brought a message from the Rebbe. And Rabbi Zalta Senior was in good. He held by the Rabbi Shalom. I mean, he wasn't a Rabbi in any way, but he wrote to him once or twice. Egon Shuma told me, but it's interesting that kind of tension. So you. By 1978, 1979, I read an article somewhere, Kollel already had, in around 76, 77, they decided that observatory is quite expensive as well. They moved to Yovel, to Francis Street. They moved the Kollel in Urania Street, the actual people learning, and the communities in Francis Street. I think it was Rabbi Rom's house. I don't know, I forgot who's. They buy a house in Francis Street. That's where the community, because they're a big community now already. They don't know what to do. I mean, they don't expect this at all. They 4 people learning, and they influence a bit. They don't envision this in any way. So that happens in That's in that's in Francis Street, and in 1976, Rabbi Shakovetsky has been teaching in Wetz quite a lot, and he gives like beginner shiurim in Gemara. He sends a lot of them to Or Sameach, one or two to Tifrach, whatever. And there are guys who are still learning Wetz, so what they want to have a high level of Gemara of learning. So he decides they have to open a yeshiva. So he goes to Israel, and he starts seeing friends and that. He speaks to a Baruch Cross and asks, do you want to come to South Africa to become Rosh Yeshiva? A yeshiva, especially for Baalei Tshuva. And they call it Yeshivas Or Yerushalayim. He comes to South Africa. They have about 20, some full-time, some part-time. They have a yeshiva in Urania Street. Aside from the Kollel, also yeshiva. In 77, like September 77, suddenly Rabbi Shakovetsky says he's going. He's leaving South Africa. Rabbi Glassman only been like 10 months. He doesn't know how to run a kollel. He doesn't run an institution. He came to teach, to be like a Rosh Yeshiva. Teach Shir Klali, teach Gemara, teach to Baalei Tshuva. Suddenly he's lumped with this kollel, this whole institution, and the funding and everything. So they bring out Rabbi Aaron Troy. Rabbi Bernard, who's very involved in Chabad already, helps him with fundraising. And he brings out Rabbi Aaron Troy, who's apparently a very good fundraiser as well. And they help raise funds and this and that. And he becomes like the Rosh Kollel. But that's, I think, looking back, it could have affected the whole Kiruv approach of the Kollel, because now you have a Rosh Shiva, who's the Rosh Kollel, who doesn't know anything really about Kiruv. He's not a natural Kiruv person. His thing is teaching Gemara, not inspiring people and this and that. You still have Rabbi Hassan. Rabbi Hassan is very successful. Eventually he becomes almost official. He doesn't get paid, but he's almost like the university chaplain. And he's giving shiurim everywhere, and in the medical school.
Very well attended.
Very well attended, and Rabbi Tats is his star pupil, in the medical school. And very popular, and he's not a full-time kollel person anymore, because he can't be, because he has to be with these students all the time. So he's involved in that. My father arrived in 73 with a batch together with Rabbi David. What is the name? For a second, he didn't last so long, but also Rabbi Shane and other Rabbanim arrive at the time in 73, and they also strengthen the kollel, and they give Michtam and Yar shiurim, and in 1975 they open like special shiurim for women, which they open a girls' school called Beis Yaakov for the girls of the girls' high school, and they have a learning program for girls called Beis Yaakov as well. In 76, the tensions build now between Chabad and the Kollel, the Das crowd and the Kollel crowd, and the Kollel are pushing to separate. The Menorah Oxford is like a brilliant experiment of all the kids of the Kollel and the Kollel community, and the Adas, like a third of them, that's a third is from there. A third is like Chabad, Lubavitch people, and a third of the locals from Killarney. Mm-hmm. Right, like the Brodies, they were brought to Oxford Shul because they lived there. They live in Saxonwold. Jacob and Philip and Claudia. So they're agitating because suddenly Rabbi Bernard has introduced like big pictures of the Rush River and this and that, and there's a lot of they try to save Menorah, but in 77 it splits into Menorah Oxford, into at least Torah Academy and Shara Torah. Yeah. And then Shara Torah is like only it's grade 1, I think it's grade 1 to standard 1, but by But
Kagi Rubens brought in?
not yet. Not
he
yet.
was a bit later?
No, much later. He was first a teacher, and then he was a. In 1980, in 1980 they have the first principal called Rabbi Azimrat. He's brought there. And I'll just backtrack a little bit. There were two incidents with the kollel. In 1972, Rabbi Kreisler was invited by Rabbi Bernard to speak at Oxford Shul because he was out of town, Rabbi Bernard. And they asked Rabbi Kreisler, can you please say the prayer for the State of Israel? Well, and South Africa, and he said, well, I'm not used to this. I don't want to say it. I'm not used to the words. Can someone else? All of a sudden, another incident. Then in the Kiddush, asking, what are you against the State of Israel? Are you against the thing? So he says, yes, I don't agree with it. Suddenly that splashed over the South African Jewish Times. Rabbi Bernard obviously defends B'nai Akiva, who are these kollel people? How can they not pray for Israel? Isn't Israel important to them? And it's the Students Jewish Zionist Association, it wasn't called Soldiers yet, Harold Weiner, writes in favor of the kollel, saying how they love Eretz Yisrael and they love the things. But there's a whole big fight between B'nai Akiva and Hanalav B'nai Akiva and thing. So already then they're attracting attention.
And Harold wrote?
Yeah, Harold Weiner wrote.
Harold's a very close friend.
Oh really? Okay, he wrote very pro-kollel. And Rabbi Kasper wrote against the kollel. Rabbi Kasper before was a bit pro, but now he wrote very sarcastically. You can't expect much from people just learning the whole time to know how to run a pulpit and this and that. And that's Rabbi Kasper was upset with him. That was one incident which was upsetting, but that was I think it's called the Shabbos HaKollel incident, whatever that was. Then in 75 or 74, 75, at the beginning of the 70s, Rabbi Rosenzweig passes away. Rabbi Bernard convinces Rabbi Zaltzer to become a dayan on the Beis Din. And he said, they already had a dasya. They had a separate thing, which was under the Beis Din, under the auspices of the Beis Din, but it was totally separate. They're paying for the abattoirs, paying everything. So the deal was, we join you. Dasya becomes under Beis Din as well, right? And the Beis Din pays for all the costs of a dasya and for the shoftim of dasya. Well, good deal. Right, but the understanding, at least Rabbi Kasper has the understanding that everyone's going to eat from every butcher, so that's the understanding that's what I understand. There's a clause in the contract that if Rabbi Zaltzer, for whatever reason, resigns from the Beis Din, everything goes back to that. They can have the abattoir back and they can have separate things. So in 74, 75, whatever, they discover that the Adas people and kollel will only buy from Feller's Adas shop. They won't buy from anywhere else because they only trust that shchita. They don't trust any other shchita. They discovered it, I don't know, because Gloria was using only them. She was close to Rabbi Zaltzer at the time. So
the caterer.
Yes, and the connoisseur. So they approached Rabbi Zaltzer. Is it true that you told people that Shabbos? Yes, it's true. So what do you mean? On your Shabbos, person can't eat. If you don't Shabbos, then it's okay, whatever. And he was having a hog. He decided to resign, Rabbi Zaltzer. So Rabbi Zaltzer resigned, and they knew they get flack for doing this. Meanwhile, Rabbi Bernard takes the side of Rabbi Zaltzer, even though he is the rabbi of Oxford Shul, which is a constituent of UHC. So he reads out the chief rabbi's letter that you can't trust that Dastik was only under one rabbi, and then he takes it away. Rabbi Zaltzer is a very trustworthy person. Don't worry, you can go there. And there's like a controversy there. There's the nice. It's the 1976, the bicentenary of the American independence, and Rabbi Bernard writes to Rabbi Kasper, you know what happens when English people try and and start up with Americans, whatever. There's like tension there, right? So now Casper suddenly forgets that there's this escape clause, and he's not allowing an abattoir for Adastia. So they don't know what to do. I mean, Adastia, Walter Zeliger, they're very, they go with the rules on that. But Michael Koff and other people, but other people are, the Koilel are gung-ho. So they go and they say there's a rule on the statute books that an abattoir, because other people open abattoirs the whole time, it can only be opened if the head of the religion ratifies that you need an abattoir. And Rabbi Casper refused to sign off that they could have an abattoir. So the Koilel go and they convince the Minister of Agriculture that they're a different religion. And then they allow it. But there's a tension here. I don't know if the whole rest of the community knows about this tension or doesn't know about this tension, but there's tension there. And during this whole period, Rav Shekavitsky is a bit stuck. I mean, he's very frum and he wants something, but you can't exactly get many donors if you come strongly against the Beis Din, right? Because upstart, I mean, they know that they're not Beis Din, but to be too, so there are theories that that's why he left, because there was too much tension there. And I've heard also from Megan Schumann that there was tension between Rav Zaltzer and Rav Shekavitsky. And Rav Zaltzer was upset that Rav Shekavitsky wasn't more. Rav Zaltzer had nerves of steel. He was a very, very thick skin. He didn't care. But Rav Shekavitsky wanted to do. So this has happened until around 86, when Rabbi Yossi Zaltzer, who's come back from, because his father died in 1980, he's come back from Israel. He's done apprenticeship in Israel, realizes that there's a system called Normal and Mahadrin. He suggests that they have a Mahadrin commission, and then they dissolve Adassia. That's very expensive to upkeep, and it's only Adassia and Koilel eating them. So he resolves the issue, and they have this Mahadrin commission, which is made up of Chabad, and that's a different story. On the other side, you have Chabad in 1980. Rabinovitz comes to visit South Africa and to get officially become emeritus chief rabbi of South Africa. And he notices in the connoisseur, I don't know how he notices this, because no one else has gone into the tricks of Lubavitch, but he notices that the chickens are Chabad chickens. They're not Beis Din, even though they say Beis Din, they Chabad things. Apparently, I just spoke recently to Salva Farmer. He remembers Rabbi Reynolds coming there and speaking and saying, "What is the chicken going to go around to the gartel?" And he was like, and they were furious at him. The Chabad. They said, "No, he's making a mistake." And he writes like 3 or 4 articles, because he's written for Jewish Herald. He's like the writer against Chabad. Like he just goes into them that they're not Zionistic and they're not he makes a huge deal out of it. So those are the controversies. But in '84, eventually it comes out, because South Africa is slow, that the Lubavitch Rebbe had said that the Holocaust happened because it was like a poisoned limb. Europe was like a poisoned limb, and Hashem has to amputate that limb. So there's quite a few survivors who are very, very upset about it, and they go to, I don't know why, Dafka, there was a B'nai B'rith in Pretoria, and they invite Rabbi Lipskitz to come there, and there's a very contentious thing that he said, no, you mistranslated it, and that also invites letter writers to say that Chabad is a cult, and whatever, those are the controversies. But if we step forward, at the same time, the Koilel as an outreach movement is losing power. Why is it losing power? Because in 1981, they invite Rabbi Shlomo, this huge Rav, right? Comes to Koilel, and Rabbi Glassman says, spends a whole lot of resources on it and everything. He says for 1 year, but there's, between 79 and 81, Rabbi Shurkin comes, and he's very, very popular. He's ex-South African, he's very popular, and he's also
Very learned.
extremely learned, and also very easygoing. And South Africa, and he makes a very good impression, but he only stays there for 2 years. So I'm saying he would have had maybe more of an influence had he carried on, but in 1981, Rabbi Shurkin comes. Rabbi Sternbach comes. Rabbi Sternbach lasts only a year, because he just, he wanted more separation between the Kollel people are learning and the community. Didn't want mixing, and that
But
was...
he's sure at the Torah Center.
No. So he's brought out by the Kollel. He's brought out by the Kollel.
And that
he says to them, he says to his followers, I'm going back to Israel. In a month's time, you make a community for me and I'll come back. He comes back, Torah Center. So you already got now Torah Center and Kollel. But the same people split into two communities.
Yeah.
About a year later, Rabbi, who was the head of, Rabbi Rogozeski, who was brought out to be the principal of Shara Torah. So he's the head of Francis Street Kollel. Kollel has moved from Uranus Street to Manor Street. Yeah. The Kollel bookshop and that.
And Francis Street.
Francis Street is more a community. Now, they decide that actually they want more integration, and they want everyone to move to Manor Street. But there were holdouts in Francis Street, so they made their own community called Kollel Gros Achim.
And Rav Greenberger?
Rav Greenberger was after Rabbi Rogozeski left.
Yeah.
Rabbi Rogozeski is the rabbi there.
And he took over the show.
He took over the show, yeah. So so now it's not very effective when you have three communities who are actually very acrimonious to each other. It wasn't like an amicable split in any case. There was a fight in Yeovil and Hunt Street and this and that, and Rabbi Rogozeski wrote this letter, and I discovered, it's in my thesis, and there's a lot of acrimony. You can't really be a good outreach movement. I mean, the Kollel tribe, Kollel Shul is still carrying on. It's in Manor Street. They make a seed with Germiston Shul, with Waverley Shul, but also being situated in Yeovil is not. Yeovil's getting worse and worse, right?
But I must mention the Kollel bookshop that David Aronovitz.
Yes.
It's now 50 years.
Yes.
That had a tremendous.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Tremendous effect. People from all walks of life.
Everyone used to come to on Sundays, especially. Used to crowd around there.
That had a tremendous. People bought this for him, and it had a tremendous impact on the community.
I think Monty Orenstein ran it originally.
That's right.
David Aronovitz. So you had that, but I'm just saying where the lull is. I'm looking at it from historic period. So you have the 70s, Kollel is up and up and up. Then suddenly they split up, and Rabbi Hassan goes back to the star guy, Rabbi Hassan. For some reason, soldier, so they don't want to pay him as a chaplain. He's got a job in Manchester. He goes back to Manchester. Yeah. They're very upset about it, but they're trying to get Rabbi Hassan. Rabbi Hassan has an accident. He also can't be a chaplain. So there's a lull here. There's a gap. So I don't know exactly, this isn't consciously what happened, but Rabbi Jeremy Aramov came back to South Africa for a bit. He was in South Africa before, and he sees this gap. And the time is ripe now, at least in 1984-85, to bring Or Sameach to South Africa. So what he does is, very cleverly, he saw pupils like Larry Shane. Rabbi Mofson actually wasn't ever in Or Sameach itself, apparently. He was a Kvar Chassidim, but he hung around a lot. Shmuel Mofson. He hung around a lot. He knew him well. He placed a few of his best guys in South Africa as youth directors. So Larry Shane was the youth director of Soraldine. Rabbi Mofson was the youth director of Sydenham, and there were other guys, and they were around Johannesburg. And there was a deal, and they never had such good youth directors, so the shuls were very happy to take them. Or Sameach, I think, said they'll pay half the salary, and they pay half. They learned in the Kollel for in the mornings, and they used to do their stuff in the afternoons. And already then, after a year, because Rabbi Mofson is very popular, right? And it brings out guys like Rabbi Milevsky from Rabbi Gottlieb, and they bring out, and they get crowds of 200, 300 people. So they start a shul in Glen Hazel. They want to start in all different places, but Alan Zolberg, sorry?
So I was at the very first minyan
Yeah.
We barely got a minyan.
Oh, right. Apparently they struggle. They
England Hazel.
has to go across the road to get back to Moishi's or something.
It was on a Shabbos and we struggled to get a minyan.
Right.
There was
it Rav Mofson's house, right?
Yeah.
In England Hazel, in Northfield, yeah.
Northfield Avenue.
Northfield. So then you have then you had Or Samach, and Or Samach Sami are getting people from, I don't know, holdouts from Rabbi Pfeiffer, people from around the area.
Rabbi Pfeiffer came into the Kina.
Did he come to it?
No. So if you could just speak a little bit about, because he also had a tremendous
impact. Okay. But I'll go back to Rabbi Pfeiffer because that's a separate chapter. I'll go back. I'll go with this and then we'll get back to Yeshiva College because Rabbi Pfeiffer was brought up for Yeshiva College. You have Or Samach. Or Samach are like now they're attracting people, but Larry Shane and Rabbi Mofson are young. They're in the late 20s maybe, and they don't want to, maybe early 30s, but they're very young, and they've got people, locals from Glen Hazel who actually know stuff in there. They feel funny to be a rabbi with them, so they ask Jerry Marimov what to do. He sends out Rabbi Orbach, and he becomes the rabbi. He's not like Baal Shuvah, but he's a serious rav. He's taught in Or Samach for many years. He's a lamda and he can teach, whatever. So he becomes then Rabbi Mofson, especially Rabbi Shane, is the guy, the money guy, getting all the fundraising. And then Rabbi Mofson goes to Witz, very popular,
very
extremely popular. I remember him when I was at Witz, when I was saying that, and he becomes a chaplain there, and it just becomes a cool place to go to. But it wouldn't be such a cool place if it wasn't for Rav Atat, who comes there to help his father in around 88, 89. And he comes like a little shiur, and some people come. The next year the word goes round, and suddenly, out of nothing, like hundreds of people are coming every Monday night.
So can I just mention something?
Yes, I'll show you.
In Waverley Shore, I gave once a talk for the anti-missionary.
Yeah.
And it was on Isaiah 53, and somebody comes and he says, "Can you join my talk?" I don't know who it was. It was actually Rabbi Tetzi, just arrived in the country. And he sat in on my talk. We became very close. And this is before he was well known.
Yes.
And then he gave...
So Barry Marcus was there, or Rabbi Furman was there, really?
Rabbi Furman. And then he started giving talks.
Yeah.
And literally every week, hundreds and hundreds of people in the winter and the summer would come to his talks.
People would go, that's what like Larry Shane was saying, but I remember that. They'd bring their dates to... Yeah. Even though they're sitting separately.
There were even non-Jewish people that would come.
Oh, really? Wow.
And there are a few marriages and I know personally that the husband, the wife who wasn't Jewish at the time, encouraged her husband to go.
Oh, wow.
And then later she married and they're living here.
Wow.
It was because of
amazing.
those talks.
So Rav Mofson used Rav Atat's shiurim. He had a keen eye. He knew everyone. He spoke to everyone. So anyone who would come to the thing, he would take down their details. And then he'd phone them. No cell phones then. He'd phone them and invite them over and this and that grew the community. It became something the cool place to be. Or Samach, a kollel started the whole idea of, but Or Samach in numbers was like tremendous. It was this great boon, right? Of extremely popular.
Okay, can I just also, because I think it's interlocked. The condition was that he would actually stay in Yovel.
Right, yes.
Right, so Shabbos says he stayed in
Kollel, because he wanted to be in the Kollel community.
In Yovel. Yeah. And also from Yovel, Chaim Shane with Torah Chizuk, also at this time.
Well, Torah Chizuk was also in the 70s.
Yeah. So
he brought out Rav Horowitz, and he brought out Rav Falk, and he brought out other people.
And they would spread with the different...
Yes. But they would go everywhere.
Yeah. It was a lovely unifying... That a visiting Rav would be...
go to Bnei Akiva even. I remember Bnei Akiva would especially accommodate them on Tisha B'Av night. The Rabbi Frand on Tisha B'Av, I remember him at Bnei Akiva. There was... so then, it's funny, because Or Samach was in Glen Hazel, we lived in Yovel, this was a sad thing, they used to invite my father to speak there. And Berea Shul, at the time, allowed him not to come in the morning. So we would walk with him. There's good memories of him. Is that he would start off giving a shiur in Kollel. I won't go to that shiur or whatever. Then Bnei Akiva. Then we would walk to Or Samach. He'd give like 3 in the morning. They would stay there till like 8 in the thing, and then one year I think Rav Rapport was still involved with Osmach. We walked home with Rav Rapport from Glen Hazel back to Yabel. So that was like the spend because of long nights for us. So that was like the Osmach. So Osmach noticed the gap and they managed to.
Can I also just mean with Rabbi Lappin? David Lappin also had a tremendous influence on Shirim on a Saturday night.
Yeah, very, very much so. But Rabbi Lappin, all these Rabbi Lappin and Rabbi Fachler and this and that, if it wasn't for Koilel's thing, I'm not sure if they would. And also, as to bear in mind, Rabbi Tzatz is a product of the Koilel, 100%. Rabbi Mofsa not as much, but he was influenced by like Yeshua Levi and other people who were involved with the Koilel. Saying if not for the Koilel as the foundation, you wouldn't have had any of this.
It's true.
I don't think you would have had it all. And that's part of the reason why I wrote the thesis. My father was involved in the Koilel, and you have to like fix the record, you know? Like this is the true historical record of what happens and see it in a linear fashion. So I'll just go quickly at Rosh Hashanah and then we'll get to Rav Fachler. So then you had Rosh Hashanah after a while, like everything, like Koilel is that. What happens is, and you have this in all communities in America, that you have a Kiruv community, getting more and more people from and doing outreach and that. But then there's a community, so you've got to worry about the community. So now you can't do outreach. So what do? So Rosh Hashanah, the clever thing, it just happened. It's not like that it was planned, but which is interesting about Rosh Hashanah, they're more flexible than the Koilel before them. Is Rabbi Tzatz leaves in about 93. So they asked Rabbi Furman, who's a very popular when Waverley to become the rabbi, and then they make an Rosh Hashanah Savoy. So they're really branching out, and they're making Rosh Hashanah Glassman because people at Glassman ask for Rosh Hashanah. So Rosh Hashanah are controlling the community, not just one Ben Hazel, but in really three things. That's one separate issue that goes, but that's not because of Kiruv. That's just because there's demand. But in about 94, around then, Rosh Hashanah the Kiruv is not going as well as Rosh Hashanah is a nice community. It's big. It's really a community, but it's not doing Kiruv. So like Alan's always complaining, you need a Kiruv thing. At the same time, they bring out Rosh Hashanah. They make a Koilel for Rosh Hashanah of people studying and young guys. And they get this young guy, Gabi, what was his surname? I'm related to him, a second cousin. He's very, very popular. Not Klitzner. Anyway, a young rabbi, extremely popular, and he becomes like the rabbi in Sunny Road Shul. But then he won the lottery and then he passed away, like at 30 or something. But then they have Sunny Road Shul, and then Rabbi Mofson helps Sunny Road Shul, and the Kiruv keeps evolving. But even if there's splits, it's all amicable, and whenever there's a gap, now we have awesome student. An awesome student, the advantage of awesome student, the other ones, funding is always a problem. They managed to get funding from this American organization, Wolfson, I forgot what it's called, and they have this big building now, and they have different methods of Kiruv. But the truth is that it's become harder and harder. As South Africa has liberated more, and South Africans are more liberal, then the Kiruv aspect is harder. But the Frum community is strong because the fertility rate among Frum is much higher than among those who aren't religious. So I think that's what's keeping the high religious.
Can I just also, I have to interrupt.
Sure.
Also at this time, my brother and I and a few others were youth directors in Santon Shore. Rabbi Shushot also, they encouraged the youth, and a lot of people became from in Santon Shore as well.
Right.
And when they're becoming more from, like Gerald Lasner, then they move out.
Yeah, he moved to Ben Hazel. It was very tough for Rabbi Shushot because he had Koilel tried to have a thing in Wendywood and then Osmach, Galamana, and you become this Rabbi Goldman even discussed this with me in Sydney. You become close to these guys, you make them from and this and then they move out.
But that was the idea. You wanted to make them from. But
Yes,
you knew
yes.
that they're not going to be
That's
staying.
the conundrum there. So that's this one side. Now, the way I structured my thing, so that was the whole chapter on this is discussed a lot with the Kiruv and that. Now, what did the traditionalists do? Like, what did the rest of the community do while all this is going on? When all this is going on, there's a whole other half of the Orthodox community. What are they doing? So the accommodators, which we said the ones with the professors, they're getting less and less because the parties are getting worse and worse, and people aren't coming out. But Yeshiva College is also dealing with Rav Santa. So in 1972, Rav Kasper isn't getting many people for his Rabbi's training college. So I asked, maybe we can do a deal. Yeshiva College we'll run it together. They said, no way. Yeshiva College doesn't believe in this. Doesn't believe Rabbi's training college, right? We're not joining you. So in the meantime, Rabbi Tanza has always had these plans to have Yeshiva Gezeila.
Yeah.
Not just a Yeshiva Gezeila. So he reaches out to his good friend Rabbi Goldfein, and they make and he brings them out as and they make a Yeshiva Gezeila so after matric you have Yeshiva Gezeila.
And that's on the
campus, on the Yeshiva College campus. And Rabbi Goldfein is this young, big Talmid Chacham who's very impressive, and they bring him out. I forgot exactly where he was then, in Minneapolis maybe. They bring him out, and they bring him out.
He's originally from Telz.
He's originally from Telz. He grew up in a not such a they were very observant, but not such a learned thing, and that he was influenced because they had a chizuk thing in Telz to spread chizuk around, and the rabbi who taught him, who actually happened to be Yossi Hollander's father, Rabbi Hollander came out from Telz to teach him, and he said he has to go. He told his father he has to go to Telz. So they sent him to Telz, and he rose up and he became like a chavrusa of Rabbi Gifta, the Rosh Shiva there, and he was like a star pupil and this and that. And Rabbi Tanz in one of these, you see one of these videos, the last year of Rabbi Goldman's life, I think Rabbi Tanz said that Rabbi Gifta told him that the whole Torah Chizuk thing would have been worth it just to make Rabbi Goldman and Rabbi Goldman come out to South Africa. So Rabbi Goldman is there from 73 to 77. He's a co-Rosh Yeshiva.
His son Avi was in the same class as me.
Oh, really? Well.
We go back now.
So, and he's doing a lot, and he wants to make our smicha program as well. It's called the Bronner rabbinical thing. It's teaching on a high level. So some will just to teach for the sake of learning, and some to actually become rabbanim. But things turn a bit sour because anyway, it's hard to have two Rosh Yeshiva in one thing. So he leaves at the end of 77. He had a 5-year contract, 73 to 77. That's 5 years altogether. So he leaves. He leaves the Yeshiva College. I'll get back to him, but Rabbi Tanza is upset. He hasn't got Rosh Shiva. So then Rabbi Krasner fills in a bit, but he looks for someone else, and he finds this genius Rabbi Fachler. He was, I think, in London at Chaim Yeshiva. Brings him out, and Rabbi Fachler is on his feet the whole day, giving 9 hours. He's like tremendous energy and ilui and giving everything, but he was also getting people who were just attracted to it, not students, and that made him want to make his own community. So he had, I think, within the Yeshiva College, he had his own minyan kind of. The Yeshiva Marashah was started there, and then eventually, with the blessing of Rabbi Tanza, he made his own community called Yeshiva's Marashah. His brother later comes out, and he's the head of the boys' school, or Yeshua Pfeiffer. Rabbi Pfeiffer comes out, and he's now the head of he has his own Yeshiva Marashah, Rabbi Tanza gives up the idea of having Yeshiva Gezeila in his complex in the campus. Meanwhile, Rabbi Goldfein is left with like 2 Talmidim. And I mean, you can see this on the made a video, so I won't go into too much detail about Rabbi Goldfein, but he has 2 Talmidim, I think Ron Hendler and Yossi Hollander. But then other part-timers come very quickly afterwards. They agree to rent from the Curve, and the back of the Curve, the observatory, the Observatory Valley Shul or something it's called. I think Barry Marcus's father was around then, I'm not sure. Barry was there as well, and they have their own. They make the yeshiva, and quickly but it attracts the interest of the Basin, because the Basin always wanted to have this teachers training thing, but the rabbis. Rabbi Goldfein writes out his manifesto, which is very interesting, because in 78 with 2 people he's writing out what he envisions. That he envisions Rabbonim to be in South Africa and give back to the community, and they'll be the rabbis. He's got like 2 students. You don't imagine what would have been after, but he had this vision. And the Basin are attracted by it. So they agree, at that time it's a lot of money, to give 100 Rand a month to thing. And Rabbi Salomonovitz joins, and he gives the smicha, the program of Yoredea, to the students as well. And it builds up quite quickly, goes to 10 students, and then goes up to about 30 or 40 students almost after a while. And they have programs they camp out or whatever in King David one year, and they give a whole lot of programs for 3 days in a row, and they teach there, and they give special training to become chaplains as well, and they had a shochteam thing. I think that's where Rabbi Gerson started, especially because Rabbi Salomonovitz is involved, and they're giving thing, and they're getting a name for themselves. After about 10 years, they've already got quite a few Rabbonim around the time.
Warren Goldstein was there?
No. So this is, I'm saying, I'm going in, this is until 87. So you already have, after 10 years, Rabbi Hendler, he's already a Rav in Inval, Rav Genendi is in 9th Street Shul, Rabbi Gerson is in Blackari. You have quite a lot of Rabbonim then, and then around 1990, Warren Goldstein comes in with Craig Kasser and this and that, and he's got these very, very talented young rabbis, and then Rabbi Goldstein eventually becomes his star pupil, right? And Rabbi, at the same time, Rabbi Kasser becomes the head of the South African Board of Jewish Education, and Rabbi Goldstein, and that changes the whole. Having Rabbi Goldstein as the chief rabbi, suddenly marks a marked shift between you having these more to the left accommodator rabbis. One of time now to discuss Rabbi Harris, but Rabbi Harris was chosen especially by the community because they didn't want Chabad, they didn't want a traditionalist rabbi, so they managed to get someone from England who still had the old English customs. But Rabbi Goldstein is completely different, and a completely different way. It's really a big Talmud Chacham as well. He's learnt a lot, and he takes the community in other ways. He has what he calls a spiritual entrepreneurship, where if Rabbi Goldfein stressed the traditionalists, the Litvish way, very much Litvish the whole time. Lithuania, if you hear any of his tapes, he mentions Lithuania a lot. Very much into the Lithuanian tradition, and very, even though he himself is not a Litvak, he's very much into restoring the whole Litvish tradition and how South African Jews are so smimistic and they have the Lithuanian.
Compromising on halakha.
What?
Very
Yes, he was uncompromising on halakha, yes. Although he also had a more broad approach when it came to not arguing on the basin, not being separate, and not being machmir when there was no need to be machmir. And he felt that the whole stress on Chalav Yisrael was too much, and they were being too machmir with that. And he also has things about against like the giant menorah in the Bamish and this and that, and he had a thing that there shouldn't be Hasidic minhagim. You should restore the minhagim of Lithuania. It should be very strict, very Torah oriented. You shouldn't learn Jewish studies in university. You can learn in university, but for like a job, but also be in contradistinction to the kollel, which is like very frum and having these taking on neck jackets, and he didn't believe in external so much. He believed that it's very important that the South Africans relate to the South African community. The South African rabbi, the culture, you mix with the culture, but he's still quite inward because that's his nature, that's his personality. Rabbi Goldstein takes this and he spreads it out. And I spoke to people from overseas and everything, and the Shabbos project just like blows him over because of this whole thing of introducing, and Rabbi Goldstein also introduces higher learning to in a higher level of learning in King David, Generation Sinai, where everyone gets together. Sinai, and then the Generation Sinai are two separate. Generation Sinai's father and son come and learn in all schools, all different schools, not just the Jewish schools. And Sinai and Darby in Basi's top level and top. He believes that Judaism has to be presented in the most aesthetic way and in the most authentic way. Not just authenticity is very important, but also aesthetics is important. The klima far, he calls it. And so that he presents this kind of thing, this very a public thing, but as I highlighted in more detail, the difference between, let's say, him and Orsameach, or like he was at Orsameach Sunny Road, he was the rabbi there.
He was the rav there.
He was the rav there, very popular rav there. So we have, you have like the Rabbi Goldstein as opposed to, let's say, Orsameach, or Sameach, or the Kollel, or Chabad. Even though, a lot of his programs he collaborates with them, but philosophically, he's very much philosophically a student of Rabbi Goldstein. And his belief, which is interesting because my father had a similar idea, Rabbi crossed over a bit. He's very South African, Rabbi Goldstein then. But his belief is that that Torah belongs to everyone, and that the approach isn't just trying to introduce a whole lot of mitzvahs to someone. Rather, give them a genuine Torah experience, and the Torah itself is self-promoting. The Torah itself will make that person from her. The Torah itself, if they learn the genuine, authentic stuff, that itself will produce others. So an example of the difference would be that in King David, if you want to join the higher thing, you don't have to. He said to me in the interview, why should a student from a non-observant home, who's not able to be observant, why should he be given a lower level of Torah learning than a person who comes from a more observant home? Torah is for everyone. Yeah. The Torah should be shared for everyone, and we shouldn't distinguish. And Torah belongs to the whole of the Jewish people, and it should be shared by those people. So as opposed to, it's an unwritten condition, and obviously Orsameach and Kollel, they'd be happy to share with everyone. But it normally goes hand in hand. There's expectation. When you learn this amount, you become this observant, but that parallel doesn't have to be. And the more Torah you learn, the more genuine your frumkeit becomes. So that you have what Rabbi Goldstein, in one of his tapes, said people talk about Torah values, but in Tales they talk about the value of Torah. Torah is like the highest value, and everything is under its wing. So as opposed to also, let's say, the Mizrahi approach, which is, let's say, more Torah and Derech Eretz, or Torah with a lifestyle, and Torah with a broad education. This is, everything is subsumed under this very broad understanding, but authentic understanding of Torah that has come from the sages and this and that. For that reason, he was very opposed to limud, which caused a bit of controversy as well. And there was an incident with the 1 year with Yom HaShoah
and Kol Isha.
On Yom HaShoah there was a Kol Isha thing, which has placed him in a position where he's considered very right-wing. Whether that's fair or not, these are the facts. So if we look at an overall picture of, traditionalists, accommodators and this and that, I would place him as a traditionalist, not as one of the Osamach or Kyle people who are called innovators. That's in my thesis. At the same time, there may have been a bit of alienation. When I spoke to Rabbi Kursak about South Africa, and he used this model before, he said that more people are eating matzah shmura matzah, but less people are having matzah.
Wow.
Which is a nice mashal, but and Rabbi Glassman doesn't really agree with us, and he might be right. There's chattering classes that it's true that maybe there are, as the Frum community grows, there's less middle ground. We see in Johannesburg, the big shuls are empty. There's hardly any big shul. Even Sydenham's getting empty over Oxford for Shreyes and Waverley, they're all dying. And you don't have that middle thing. And
it's becoming more extreme.
Yes, more extreme. Yes. We've got quite a lot of secular as well, and reform. Not so much reform, but a lot of secular and people who aren't involved.
The traditional middle class is getting...
Rabbi Bacher, Kabel Bacher complained that it's true that because you've got Glen Hazel ghetto and this and that, no one's taking care of Santa and all of other places where there are Jews, and they aren't being taken care of.
His son Shalom's in Randburg,
right.
Because others don't want to go there.
Yes, so you have this kind of thing. So the question is whether the different direction of the chief rabbinate, very different to Rabbi Harris and Rabbi Kasper and this and that, whether that has alienated others, and if it has, is it at a worthwhile cost? That's the chief question. What I pose as a question, that's how I ended my thesis, is that compared to Lord Jacobowitz, he took over in around 66 or 65, 66, he took over in England. And he stated from the outset that he's going to bring the community more rightward, and if there's certain casualties, if people leave, so be it. So, I mean, the falling in tradition, and you can see that in certain practices that were always in the 90% style, like lighting candles or sending Seder, have gone down to the high 70s, which is still high for most communities. That shows there's been a bit of a low level on the traditional side because they have no home. I mean, we can say, and I would say it has been worthwhile but I think there needs to be a recognition that for every positive thing, there's going to be some kind of fallout. Mm-hmm. And we have to, life is about that. It's about recognizing what happens. And this is like, if you look back from 1920s to 2020, it's been a tremendous change in the Johannesburg community. But it obviously has been some fallout. And how do we deal with that in the future? We didn't mention Rabbi Kursak. Rabbi Kursak was in South Africa for, I think, 50 years more. Yeah. And he started off as rabbi and he had this, firstly, and he has a very interesting essay in 1976 in Barakah, which I mentioned before, the Hebrew Journal, where when he was obviously the side of his father-in-law, Aloy, very upset with the Kollel. Some of them he had taught, he was senior to them, and suddenly they're going and they're saying they're another religion and they're separating. It was an uncomfortable position. And he writes how it's very nice that they're Balei Tshuva. And then you realize that he's not so happy with the whole Balei Tshuva movement. And he says, they have to realize that the authorities that are higher than them, and just because we have leniencies doesn't mean that it's any less kosher. And he's also quite critical that they should know their place and not question the authorities who have been there for so long. It's not right, it's not manner, but he writes in a very stark way because he's writing in Hebrew in the thing. So he had this and there's an interesting YouTube, if you, I don't know why the name's guessing again, but someone, another guy has been writing a few essays about Frumkeit, who attended JSAP. He has like a 20-minute video, but I'll just say it quickly. With what I remember and recall, he had this inspiration, because and there's many copycats since then, of having an institution that can teach UNISA, so that people go to, and at the same time have a Jewish studies program. And he called it Jewish Studies University Program, I think. JSAP. Or Jewish Students, I'm not sure what the S stands for. And it started off, I think, in the base, then it started there, and then it suddenly got traction and this and that, and it took off, and they then used Arcadia grounds. And many people, I think, many people were very, very involved. And at first it was quite intense. I think it lowered the intensity in the Jewish studies section, but it introduced people, and they didn't have to sacrifice having to go to yeshiva and then not having university, because you had both all in one campus. And so the people who want to go to university, it wasn't a sacrifice for them, and they would be introduced to this. And even if not all of them became religious afterwards, it had a very positive impact on their thing. And he was very dedicated. Even after he was Rosh Beisin, he still came and gave shiurim there. And his role in Jewish education he's known as a Rosh Beisin for years, from like 88. He was Rosh Beisin for over 30 years. Yeah. Or just about 30 years, but his contribution to education also an important role in this whole epic of the century.
Can I just mention one thing? It's also very important in this whole discussion. B'nai Akiva, that I was very involved in, so they would have a year Akshara that you'd come to Israel, and you'd go to kibbutz.
Right, before MTA,
And before, and what happened is that the numbers were decreasing steadily.
Right.
And they went to Chaim Leikob, who was the shaliach, and he said, why don't people want to go? And they said, we want more. And then they said, well, what do you want? To go to yeshiva.
Sally Sachs told me this.
And that's how, and it's amazing, because a lot of the Talmidim from Yeshiva College didn't really need, because after school they would go straight to Yeshiva.
Right.
And many students from Yeshiva College immediately went to, it was in the Gush or Kerem B'Yavne, and then quite a few of those students actually went to the Mir.
Interesting. No, because Sally Sachs told me, he was like the head then, that the 1 year they said they don't want to go to kibbutz, they want to go to yeshiva.
Yeah.
And those days no one travelled. It wasn't like travelling now is common. The head of B'nai Akiva suddenly, because he arrived, he came to South Africa like, what's going on here? I forgot the name of the guy. Like, you're not coming to kibbutz? Like, what's going on? And then they succeeded in changing the whole outlook from Akshara to a year, at least a year in yeshiva.
But some stay for more.
Yes.
I've got 3 nephews that spent more than a year in yeshiva.
Right.
It's something
it
was unheard of before.
Yeah, but I think there's a lot of and if Kollel hadn't arrived, if they hadn't had this thing, it maybe wouldn't be. And I was thinking, and I didn't write this in my thesis. Maybe I'll write it somewhere else, I'm not sure. when I was writing this, so when people told me Bnei Akiva were involved in Kiruv, and Kiruv wasn't really invented yet in the 60s, so I was skeptical always, because I remember my mom drinking words on such a high level, this and that. Because we don't historicize things, we don't read as what the 60s were about.
But a few people going to camp, it was their very first taste of what the Shabbos was.
And they introduced to it, no, but Bnei Akiva were quite zealous from camp, but they didn't have so much knowledge.
Yeah.
They even write, like, in the Shir Dat, I looked at the 60s one, they were very, very simple. But they would write that we don't have the reputation, we have to increase our Torah learning, increase our things in the 60s. But the interesting thing is that if you historicize properly, then you realize that they were on the from side. Otherwise, people wouldn't call them Zerikata, they wouldn't call them that kind of thing. But more than that, I think that Kollel did a big favor for them, and Chabad as well. But Kollel was more like intellectual, this and that. I think they did Yeshiva College and Bnei Akiva a big favor because they were like sort of like the fanatics or whatever. They were the from Kollel unconsciously, and the fights between them, and the anti-Zionism maybe wasn't appropriate, and also the Orthodox success as opposed to Kollel still exists, but as an outreach thing, unfortunately, its success didn't remain. It demolished. The Orthodox, if it wasn't that Zionistic, it hit it very well. And also they offered programs, tours to Israel the whole time, so Zionist Fed was interested in that.
It's also they would take from Medinat Israel.
Yeah, they would have, but they weren't as zealous, and they weren't as opposed, and therefore they became part of the community. But the point that I'm trying to in the 70s is because you had this far right group coming like the Kollel and Chabad, that pushed Bnei Akiva now the mainstream. Yeah. So Bnei Akiva now can have more influence because they are part of the community. They're like, we're fighting against these outsiders. We don't care about being outsiders. They're anti-establishment. They want to be there. It's not like they're saying they're the establishment. They're not. They're anti-establishment. And therefore Bnei Akiva, it actually benefited Bnei Akiva's influence on the community at large, because Bnei Akiva is now like the standard for moderate orthodoxy, not like a frummer kind of orthodoxy, a normal one, because they are guarding the institutions, the Beis Din, they're defending it, they are. So it's an interesting, the dynamics.
And a lot of when you finished in the youth movement, the idea was to make Aliyah.
Yes.
So there wasn't really programs for what happens after matric.
No, that's something I want to. That is something I don't know when I'll be able to research it, but that's something I want to research, is the paradox of Bnei Akiva.
So a lot of
Rabbi Kusak was upset with that because the serious guys in Bnei Akiva, they realize their dreams of going to Israel. So the continuity is a big problem, because it's a living paradox. The ideal Bnei Akiva guy doesn't stay in South Africa.
Absolutely.
He goes on Aliyah.
That's why a lot of the members that didn't make Aliyah went to Osamach.
They went to Osamach, yes.
Or they were searching, and then they went to the Kollel.
Yes.
So you had many people in the Kollel or in Osamach.
Yeah. Augmented by Bnei Akiva.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's fascinating how everything.
So I just want to thank you. Hold on. This has been. I must come in. I'll just one sec. Just one little minute. This has been incredible. So, first of all, I must just tell you, knowing your father for me was the greatest honor and privilege.
Thank you.
And wow, he'd be so proud of you.
Thank you.
You are like the walking encyclopedia. Wow. It's incredible. Your knowledge, your insight. It is. No wonder you got your PhD. It is. This must be printed in a book. It is absolutely incredible.
I'd love to. Yeah.
And I just want to mention something which I think, on my side, growing up in that community and being part of it, and I also went to the Kollel and I went to the Torah Center, Moshe Sternbuch, Yomi in the shul with the Kippah. But something that really, I think, for me, I went to Baruch Tenzer's son's bar mitzvah, which was held in Hanof, and Avram Tenzer Brock's father came.
Yes.
And Yeshiva College was a very Zioni place.
Right.
We had Ben Gurion coming there. It was,
That's right.
It was very Zioni. At the Bar Mitzvah, Moshe Sternbuch came.
Yeah.
And Tovia Weiss. To
Wow.
Rav.
Wow.
So it just shows you the community, people had respect for each other, and the community was a unique.
Yeah, very unique.
Absolutely unique and a very special.
Yeah.
And your father, the memories of your father, he could, as I mentioned to you, could give a speech to a total secular audience, and he could give the most brilliant Divrei Torah to the most religious audience.
Right.
And he was respected and loved by everyone. And it's such an honor and a privilege to be with you. I'm so grateful.
Thank you. Thanks. It's a pleasure doing this.
It's really been amazing.
Enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
No.